Welcome to the Commerce Lab, where every week we sit down with top-performing consumer brands and leaders to understand what drives their success. How did they hit their first million, their first 20 million, their first 100 million? What strategies are working for them today that you should be testing, and what's not working that you should be avoiding? This isn't just a podcast, it's the business school for brand operators. Hey crew, welcome back to another episode of the Commerce Lab. My name is Alan Burt, and today I've brought on one of my favorite brands and favorite CEOs, and that brand is by the name of Gathre, and it's GATHRE.com. And if you're a mom or you're a parent, I guarantee you've probably run across these guys. They do an incredible job on social. They do an incredible job of producing really compelling, very attractive, branded content. And that's exactly what I wanted to talk about with Devin Killpack, who's their CEO, on today's interview, specifically because I know that they have developed a framework internally that drives how they create that content under this sort of quote unquote jobs to be done philosophy. And I really wanted to dig in and understand how they developed that, why they developed it, how they consistently produce high quality content underneath that framework. But ultimately, I wanted to break it down so that you could go back and apply it to your own businesses. Now, a few other things we talked about with Devin today. Scaling, how they were actually able to scale to where they are now. They're in the sort of mid to high 7-figure range. How are they able actually to scale to that point? Understanding that the very first $1 million year that they hit, they were able to scale to without investing a single dollar in paid acquisition. So we talk about the strategies that Devin and his team used to scale the brand to 7 figures without a single dollar of paid acquisition in the early days. Brand partnerships are a big piece of that scaling. So we talked about how he was able to go out and build these brand partnerships early on. Also, we talk a lot about team building. Devin and his wife and his other co-founders have been able to build an incredible team around themselves that allowed themselves to remove themselves a bit from the business to take care of things like family matters and personal matters while still being able to scale the business year after year. So we talk about how Devin has been able to go out and build that team. So hope you enjoyed the interview. There's some incredibly good nuggets around this, especially if you're looking to build a really powerful content building machine, which every brand should be focusing on and building on. So without further ado, I'll open up to Devin from Gathre. Hey, Devin, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Appreciate you having me.
Man, I'm pumped to have you on, and we're going to dig into some cool stuff today. But to give everybody just a little bit of context before we dive into to all the goods, can you give everybody a little bit of an intro about who you are and about Gathre?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Devin Killpack, and I am a transplant from the biology world at the university into business and kind of morphed into an entrepreneur. And so today I'm the CEO and kind of a co-founder of my wife's company called Gathre, which started about 5 years ago in a small apartment downtown Provo, Utah. And our first operation started out of the classic story garage, my parents' garage. And here we are today, 5 years later, mid 7 figures, and have had a lot of fun, over the last 5 years, lots of stages of growth, and it's been a great ride.
And so you mentioned sort of the mid 7-figure range, which is super helpful for people to sort of understand the timeline, 5 years to get to that point. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the levers and some of the things that you feel like got you there. But I think before we dig into that, let's talk a little bit more about the background of the business, because I think the talking to you guys a lot already, and talking to your wife and understanding sort of the premise of why the business started. I think that really helps give people some context around sort of the passion behind this, and I think that'll be really helpful. So dig a little bit deeper. The first product? What was the first product you guys started selling?
Essentially, it's a wipeable blanket, like a pretty tarp. So we lived in this small apartment and we're cooking dinner every night and didn't have AC. So that combination doors with 2 young kids to eat dinner on the grandma's old blanket in our front yard in the grass. And with young kids, anyone who has young kids would know that you're going to spill something pretty much every time you eat. So we ended up needing to wash the blanket almost nightly during this phase, and it became really cumbersome, especially being in a small apartment. So that was kind of the problem. The solution came when she thought it would be really great to make a wipeable blanket, something we didn't have to put in the wash every night. And shortly thereafter, on a business trip to China, I was there sourcing and came back with a book of swatches in, dozens of colors in faux leather. And she fell in love with the material, and it was a match. She thought, this is it. Let's try something out. So that's kind of the initial why behind it. And from there, we scrambled and we went and bought some material in LA and had it cut and sewn just a few blocks away from our home, and did a little pop-up shop in the summer with a bunch of other small shops in our city. And that was kind of the starting point for both the concept and then where we kicked off the sales and the actual venture.
And from there, from this wipeable, blanket, this sort of faux leather blanket, it's expanded into tons of different products, right? Where the premise is, creating, very high quality products that also look really good in your home, right? Kind of creating these spaces you would want to hang out in. But doing it in a way that's, affordable, but also looks really nice and also very, very family friendly. When did you guys realize that there was more to it than just this sort of wipeable, faux leather blanket of sorts?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we kind of started getting some traction just by launching our own e-commerce site and our own Instagram account in advance of that little pop-up, and noticed there was a lot of good feedback coming, but we didn't know if it was just friends and family, biased opinions, so we went ahead and planned to launch a Kickstarter campaign, and did that a few months after the launch and the pop-up. And that's really when we were like, wow, this thing has some legs. We raised $78,000 on Kickstarter, and it was a great marketing launch in a lot of ways for us. And we got good perspective on the future of the business, kind of a vision of where we thought we could see it going. It was, $78K in 30 days. We thought, okay, this could really turn into something.
And so Kickstarter was sort of that initial, call it product market fit, right? You're like, okay, people get this. There's a little bit of momentum here. Launched a site. What were really the main, if you could nail it down to one, I think it'd be amazing. Rarely is that ever the case, but what was the main 1 or 2 or 3 levers that got you to that first $1 million a year? Was it advertising? Was it social? Was it sort of a mix? If you had to look back, what would you accredit that? So, from Kickstarter to your first $1 million a year, what was the main lever that drove that?
I do think I can boil it down actually to 2 or 3. We've always focused intensely on brand and aesthetics. So we right from out of the gate, we were very deliberate about the aesthetic of the brand and the feeling that was invoking with customers. So I would say that's key for any brand that's trying to develop their own growth model. Another one I would say is social media and earned media. We focused a lot. We actually didn't end up spending a dime on paid advertising until after we had already reached 7 figures. So it was something maybe that only could have been done early on with Instagram, or early on with some of these other social platforms. But we focused a lot on influencers and giveaways and product placement with people who maybe aren't even necessarily an influencer, but who have a small following, and really tried to focus on getting the product in people's hands to try it out and let us know what they think and to post it if they liked it. So that I would say like social media marketing, organic marketing, what was a huge focus for us. The consistency is always key there, and working with other people to help leverage the brand. And I'm going to attach to that a co-branded collaboration we did in our first year that really helped us reach a much bigger audience. So we went to a really big influencer and did a co-branded product collaboration where she chose the design and the colors, and then we produced it and put both of our names on the product. They were mats, of course. It was our core products, but we put her name on it with us. And that was really big for us. It was a huge risk we took because we didn't know how it was going to go. And we bought so much product. We really laid every ounce of money we had on the line for that. So we took a huge risk, leveraged almost everything we had to just see how that was going to go. So, I think that's like maybe a more aggressive form of the concept of doing some marketing, organic marketing on social media and with influencers and so forth. But that was kind of the extreme end. And I think that paid off hugely for us as we were just launching that first year, and really helped propel us to that 7-figure mark.
And how quickly did you guys get from launch to 7 figures?
It took us about 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think the thing that caused a slowdown actually was with that launch, with this collab with this influencer. We launched some printed mats. So we were printing on our items, and we had some quality issues where the print was kind of coming off, like more so than it should have been. With the printed item, it's not uncommon for print to come off, like a vegan leather or faux leather bag, for example, or something. But it was more so than it should have been. So we actually pulled back and stopped selling prints, and then worked on developing prints. And it took us 2 years to actually get that right again. So I feel like that was in a lot of ways a maturity level where we were just kind of trying to figure out how to get prints back and what kind of product changes we really needed to make to start scaling. Because we knew the concept was there. We knew people liked it, but the product wasn't totally ready yet. So we kept selling, and we were steady on sales, but we didn't reach the 7-figure mark, the $1 million mark, until the year we relaunched prints.
Gotcha. Okay. And so let's dig in a little bit on both this collab and then also social. So the fact that you guys hit 7 figures without, $1 in paid ad spend is fascinating, right? And again, we're talking about, a handful of years ago. So it was a little bit of a different time, but I still think very, very relevant to brands today. The co-branded collaboration that you did, how big was this influencer, and how did you approach the deal?
Yeah, it was kind of we went on a limb. We were this tiny company who had just come off a successful Kickstarter campaign. And, I think we were on cloud 9 from that. We were like, oh man, this is going to be huge. Let's dream big. So we dreamed big, and I encourage people to dream big. I'm a dreamer. And we just explored all opportunities we could to do a collaboration with a big influencer. And my wife, Marilee, has had a connection through dance. She danced a lot growing up in New York City at Juilliard, and she had a dance connection with this influencer. We were like, we have to try and take advantage of that somehow. This influencer it's Naomi Davis, and she had a blog following was initially what she had. That was like her core asset 5 years ago. It's since totally transformed to other social media platforms now, like Instagram. But we thought it would be so great to try and chase after her. She had, probably almost 500,000 people that were visiting her blog every month or more, and very active. Blogs used to be like what Instagram and other social media platforms are today. And so we just went out on a limb and used that connection, that previous knowledge and relationship Mary Lee had. And we just made a proposal to say, hey, do you have any interest in this? What are your rates? Would you even consider this? And she gave us some rates that were pretty big for us at the time. Like, we were talking like $15,000, $20,000 for one, like to shoot photos and video with her. And at the time it was like, wow, this is going to be a big risk for us. But that's kind of how we approached that. We just really went out on a limb and scoured all of our opportunities before doing so, just to evaluate and see where we could have the best shot. If we we're going to take one shot, like where would that be?
So did you guys pay like paid rates to do the collab, or was it like a profit sharing collaboration also?
It was just rates. It was not a profit sharing.
Got it. So the co-branded nature of it was just to make the product more attractive to her audience?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Very cool. Okay. Yeah, I was sort of expecting this to be more of like a profit sharing deal, but it sounds like it was more of like a traditional like influencer type deal, but with a co-branded product just to make it more attractive. So it sounds like collaboration, and then also utilizing more sort of traditional social media marketing to hit that first 7-figure mark. Was Instagram the channel of choice? Was that sort of the main channel that drove the initial sales, aside from the collaboration?
Yeah, Instagram has always been huge for us, and it's changing in the sense that it's harder for us to reach the following we do have on Instagram today, but it has always been key. We definitely consider ourselves like an Instagram first business, where that was like our key focus and where we saw a lot of traction.
And so, and why Instagram? Why the choice to be Instagram first?
Instagram was just really developing. It was kind of going mainstream 5 years ago. And I think, as funny as it sounds, iPhones were kind of going mainstream like 5 or 6 years ago as well. And so it was this approach. It was this thing where we saw this movement happening with like more and more moms having an iPhone, and more moms spending more time on Instagram. And it just was the place where we were reaching our own friends and our own like local customer base. And we saw that they're, quickly started getting traction there. So it was just kind of a natural place.
If you had to start again, right? Like, let's say like this was the year that you had the successful Kickstarter, would you take the same approach that you took, 4 or 5 years ago, in terms of leveraging both a major influencer and then also essentially being an Instagram first sales channel business?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. In the recent conversation I was having, I was asked the same question, and I thought enough about it then. It's absolutely yes. I don't think we would really change our strategy if we were starting today. And I think, influencers and people who might be interested in a collaboration, I think today there would be more likely to need to pay some sort of royalty on the product. But that's also something I think we would have done for sure, with maybe less upfront cost or something.
Okay. And most folks listening here are already hit the first, 7 figures in revenue. So I think what I want to do is sort of shift the conversation a little bit to kind of what you guys did after that, and what you guys do, I think, extremely well right now. So I think the next question I'd ask would be, aside from Instagram, right? So Instagram collaborations got you to that sort of first 7-figure, revenue year. What has been the main lever that's continued the growth into the mid 7 figures? Is it also, Instagram, or is it also, leveraging other paid channels, like, paid promotion, paid social on Facebook or anywhere else? What have been those other new levers?
Yeah, the new levers, I would say, really dialing in on our customer and their needs. I love referencing Clayton Christensen's jobs theory from
Yeah, right.
Against Luck. And I think there's so much depth in there that can be unpacked and applied to so many situations. We studied that book like a handbook 2 or 3 years ago and have really tried to hone in on what product is and how it resonates with your audience, with your customer. And I'm a firm believer in organic word of mouth being the biggest opportunity for any brand to grow quickly. So there were a lot of things we really focused on with product to make sure that our product was one that could be spread quickly by word of mouth organically. This is not us using some sort of referral program. This is not us using some sort of incentive to drive people to share. This is just a sheer, innate sense and interest in sharing something because they really loved it and it really served a need in their life. So that was something we really focused on and still do today. Product development has become our biggest growth opportunity. It bigger than any other marketing channel, I can say, is just taking the audience we already have and giving them product that enlightens and inspires and is convenient and is beautiful and is functional. So that's probably my biggest, suggestion I can make on what has driven us to continue to grow. And I think that's going to continue to be our biggest opportunity, at least, for the next 10, 20 million.
So let's dig into that a little bit. So for folks that don't understand sort of this concept of jobs to be done, could you explain, how you guys apply that, currently to product development?
Yeah. So as we take a look at new products, well, let me start first with our existing products. So we've explored what our products do and how they serve people through the jobs lens to really understand two hires. One is the big hire and two is the little hire, and making sure that we understand first why people are making the big hire, which is buying our product, right? Why do they buy our product? For what purpose do they buy our product? Most of our products are very like these mats. They're not seen as being like a necessity. It's not like clothing. It's not food. So it takes some education. It takes a little bit of a journey, and that's really why we focused on the brand and bringing people into like the Gathre brand. When you're buying a Gathre mat, it's not just buying a product. You're kind of becoming a part of this community. And you feel a certain way when you're using the mat, right? So understanding though why people were buying our product, buying the mats was really important. And then focusing on the small hire, which was every time they use it. And Clayton Christensen goes into a lot of detail on this, but the point I want to make is that if somebody's not using your product as often as the product category would suggest, or so forth, I think you're going to lose that organic word of mouth growth option. Like it's just not going to happen. And if it is happening and you're not growing very fast, it's far too minimal. You're not reaching people on that small hire. They're not using it. They're not enjoying it enough. And the value is not there for them, and they're not going to be sharing. So those are the two things we felt like we could definitely improve in these areas. So we worked on some surveys. We got a lot of feedback from customers on what was, driving the purchase or the big hire, and what was driving the use of the product or the little hire, and understanding what that was. And then we really tried to refine our marketing and our content to be focused on those things, so that emotionally someone could get on board and see themselves in that picture, see themselves in that video, tying in emotionally.
Yep. The phrase I always like to use is, can the customer or the prospective customer visualize themselves living the better version of their life with your product, right?
Yep.
So when you look at that content, so it sounds like what you guys did from a content creation standpoint was say, okay, let's understand sort of what that big hire is. Let's understand what the reason is for buying, right? Let's create content that visualizes or sort of expresses that feeling you have emotionally. And then secondly, what are all the use cases, the reasons they would then use this in their daily life, right? The little higher, and then produce content around that so that people could just consistently visualize themselves, in this better version of their life using your product in all these different ways. Would that be accurate?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Yep. That's awesome. And I love the fact that you guys use that framework to do it. I think that's, I was having this conversation just the other day, talking with somebody who produced a ton of content for the brand, a ton of blog content, et cetera. And they had a really hard time taking people from content to then product conversion. And they're like, okay, what are the tactics? How do we get more people on the list from this content and then convert them into a sale? And it's like, well, yes, there's lots of tactics you can use to get those people onto a list and try to sell them. But at the end of the day, if the content isn't perfectly aligned, right, perfectly aligned with the brand story and perfectly aligned with that emotional connection you're trying to make and perfectly aligned with this sort of jobs to do, sort of format that you've outlined, it's going to be really hard to move them from just a simple piece of content all the way to becoming a buyer, but then also a ravenous buyer who's going to share you via word of mouth, right?
Definitely. Yeah, which is why I feel like we didn't catch immediate traction after the Kickstarter, and it took us a couple of years because even on the non-printed items, there was some product market fit issues. Like the mats weren't as feature rich as they needed to be to really have that product market fit.
So from a growth standpoint, to get where you guys are now, right? It sounds like it's sort of a combination of highly leveraging sort of a couple main channels, Instagram and influencers. But really what it sounds like is, at least the way that you guys attribute it, is it's product development. And it's saying, okay, we're going to be really, really diligent about understanding who the customer is, understanding what these jobs to be done are, and making sure that our products are aligned to them so that we can get sort of as much use out of them on a per customer basis, right? Understanding that customers are coming and buy, but making sure that they're actually going to use the product enough to develop this affinity to where they're then also going to, vocally share it with friends, that, talking about how amazing it is and all the different use cases they have for it and all the times they use it, and then kind of create that viral word of mouth channel that way. So really it's starting at the very core product and then spending enough time developing it that then is going to be the sort of the impetus for the virality.
Yeah, that's right. And then that informs content planning decisions, right? And
yep.
That informs and inspires, I think, so much that needs to be seen or shown to the customer for them to buy in emotionally. And I would maybe make it, add a second point to do that, just that beyond just product and product development, for us, it's now become so much about showing and telling in an inspiring way. And that's, I think, our two most prominent focuses at Gathre are product and the product development side, and then content and putting out beautiful, inspiring content that ultimately, I've shared this analogy with a few people in the past, and I'll try and paint it quickly, but it's the idea that you're going to put something out into this big, wide, vast world saying, this is what we want you to see. This is what we're trying to sell you. And this is our brand. This is how it looks. This is how we want you to feel. And this is what you can expect when you come to us or you buy from us. This is our brand, right? And I think I too often use the word brand to really mean like inspire people and have really great content. But it's putting that content out there, and it takes time to develop a following. It takes time to develop and find people out in the universe who are mutually attracted then to what you're putting out there. And I think that's what I see happening organically when growth is really going well. I think that part is going really well, where we're finding more and more people who resonate with what we're putting out there. So it becomes this very shared, like co-created brand. Gathre didn't just create this brand. It was co-created with, with our customers. And I think that has really accelerated the amount of user generated content that comes back to us and flows in through our channels that is like spot on, and it's astounding to me how much user generated content we get that we can share and use. And that's being shared with, these influencers or these moms, friends, right? When they post something, but it's just spot on with our brand. And it's, I think, happened through this really diligent focus on continuing that consistent message that we're just pushing these, these vibes out into the world of, here's what we want you to feel. Here's what we want you to, here's how we want you to feel when you're using the product, or when you're going to buy the product. It's because you're going to tie in emotionally to this concept.
And are you doing anything to promote that UGC creation, or is it just happening naturally, where people are just getting the product, they're buying it, and they're tagging you guys in their own sort of social shares? Or are you guys actively doing something to create, whether it be contest or, hashtags or whatever it may be? Is there anything you're doing to create that sort of UGC, creation, or is it all just natural?
No, we definitely do things to inspire it and to encourage it. Like we'll refund orders, or we'll share someone's story. And by sharing someone's story that they sent in, or sharing someone's picture that they sent in, it's compelling and motivating for people who are wanting to be shared and wanting to maybe grow their own audience. Right. So that kind of is a free side. It doesn't necessarily cost us anything to go encourage people to continue that user generated content, but it's just by putting the content we are getting out there so that those who are wanting to be seen say, hey, I can match this look and feel. I'm going to submit something because that's important to me and I want to grow my audience. But aside from that, on more of like what we would consider like a paid side, there are rewards, product rewards, shop credit rewards for people who are submitting content. We'll pick like top 3 from some campaign and say, hey, go share this on your stories, or take a picture of you using your mat, and we'll choose our top 10 and reward you all with something. So there's definitely, an active side to that process as well.
And do you guys have like an ambassador list that you're like emailing out with these promotions, or is this all happening through your social channels like Instagram, where you're just posting a promotion like on a story that says, hey, here's the promotion we're running, right? Submit or tag with this hashtag and we'll pick the top 3.
Yeah, I would say the majority of it is just through our social channels. Although just in the last year, we have started developing and utilizing more of like, an ambassador list where we've got these set key influencers or ambassadors who are just notoriously good at taking a photo that we want to share and use. And that's also cut down on a lot of our internal content creation costs. Photographer, videographer, just photo shoots that we're having to do in studio often is very much transitioned to a, ambassador driven content strategy. So that's been a really interesting piece for us, because I feel like, if I look back over the 5 years and I were to pick a random day in history during the work week, like 20% of the time, I feel like I would just land on a photo shoot day. We were always, we're always creating content. And so that we have our own photo studio, we have our own photo lights, our own camera, like we have 2-3 people on the team who are capable of taking our photos and having them look beautiful. And they're not photographers, but it's just so important and so core in our DNA that creating content and photos has, we've got all these assets to do that, but we're using them less and less now as we lean more on our ambassadors. And as they've fully caught on, they've totally bought into the look and feel we're going for. So we can rely more and more on that, which has been awesome.
Hey crew, just a quick interruption to ask if you like what you are hearing and want more.
perhaps even a weekly digest of what's working today in the world of e-commerce. Every week, our team of strategists compile a single email with growth strategies and operations tactics gleaned from our work with and analysis of today's top performing brands. Think of it as the brand operator's cheat sheet to keep you ahead of the curve and ahead of the competition. Just head over to thecommercelab.com. That's thecommercelab.com to sign up.
So we've kind of stumbled our way into exactly what I wanted to talk about with you guys. So like, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit on this and dig a lot deeper, because what you guys do better than maybe anybody else, I've seen or know, or just as well as anybody else that's out there, is produce incredibly compelling content through social. You talk to anybody. I know Gathre is a incredibly well-known brand amongst like moms, right? Especially moms of today. My wife being a great example. You mentioned the name Gathre, and like, oh my God, I love their Instagram, right? Like my wife like sends me stuff on Instagram now from you guys all the time, just because she sees something that's aspiring and she loves it, and she's like, oh, I want our nursery to look like this, right? So you guys do an incredibly good job of tapping into the mindset of the buyer. And then creating content that's going to inspire them emotionally to draw them closer to the brand, which we just talked about. And it sounds like it's this, Christensen's sort of framework you guys have used to do this. So I'd love to dive even deeper and just get even a little more tactical around kind of how that process has evolved, and kind of talk about when you guys started this, when you first started doing content creation. And I think talking through the lens of like, how would you do it now if you were to start all over again, so we can make it really, really relevant for folks today. But if you're going to start this whole process all over again, obviously you wouldn't have a big following yet, and you would need to go out and produce all that content. What's the process you would go through now, like knowing what you know? Would you hire in-house photographers? How much content would you be producing on a weekly basis in order to build up this audience?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's really making me think. And as I review back on where we kicked things off with content creation, I can remember very distinctly that the three partners and owners of Gathre, we were all very aligned on being consistent and having a good variety of content that we were posting about. At the time on Instagram, we're just talking only like posts. We're not talking like the stories were, this is way before the time of
right.
Stories. So it was like, we had we felt like 2 or 3 windows per day that we could post something on Instagram to get seen and to inspire content, or inspire people and inspire them to purchase and kind of emotionally buy in. And so we were very deliberate about the 9 or 12 squares that someone could see when they're looking at our Instagram profile. And so we were trying to be very consistent about posting. I think when we started out, even when we had almost no following, we wanted to post like 2 times a day. And for a new company without a lot of following, not a lot of customers, almost no user-generated content, we had to get really creative about what types of things we were sharing. So we'd share behind the scenes, we'd share, like some sourcing, we shared packaging, we shared like, detailed like product shots, like, hey, here's what the leather looks like really up close, and here's the backside, and informing people more about what the product was and what it was made of and how it was made, and our team who was making it. Got really creative about the types of things we were sharing, and then also sharing some inspiring content. I think early in those days when we felt inspired to try and build content as aside from just like selling product, that's always been a really meaningful side part of the brand for us, is content. And so we started at the time, I think, a series called Gather the Good. Today it's morphed into Gather Good, but it's going out there and finding somebody who's inspiring in amongst someone that would resonate with our customer base, who's inspiring in one area of their life, and ask them a lot about that and some questions. And so we were really trying to find a lot of different content pieces that we could share to be consistent and try and hit that 2 a day mark. And what that also meant was that we were needing to create a lot of our own, like take a lot of our own photos. And if we would have hired a photographer every time we were trying to put a photo on Instagram, and if every photo on Instagram was taken by a photographer, we would never have gotten off the ground, you know? And I don't think anyone expects that or thinks like that's a reality or that needs to be done. But I think one thing that today now coming current is people don't always want to see the super polished, super ideal looking photos. You know, they want it to be real. Like, give me the real stuff. Give me the meat. Don't take this selfie of you like smiling, you know, and like everything is well in the world and like you're the happiest, most successful person in the world, when deep down you might be struggling with something, you know, which we all are. That don't just like fake it, you know, give me the real stuff. And I think even then, 5 years ago, and the same thing I would do today, I would really want to focus on making things real. You know, our photos weren't as beautiful 5 years ago as they have become today. We've learned a lot. We've evolved a lot. And not just beautiful, obviously real is important too. I touched on that, but I think just that authentic, like creativity and getting, you know, employing some grit, you know, like, hey, we need a photo taken. Like, we're going to learn how to take it. You know, that was kind of the mindset. It was like all hands on deck. It was, you know, we were all three owners. We were the only, you know, for the first while, the three owners, we were doing everything from start to end. So we were all wearing multiple hats each. And, you know, we just, that's the startup environment. Right. And even now, 5 years post launch, it still feels like if we weren't all wearing at least two hats, you know, we have a team size of, we're about 12 people plus the three owners today. So we're still wearing multiple hats. And I feel like if we weren't doing that, we'd be inefficient and wasting resources somewhere.
And when you guys were sort of initially doing like content, like planning, right? So what I'd like to do is try to make a connection here for folks of, you know, once you guys sat down in the line and said, okay, here's our customer. These are sort of jobs to be done, you know, big job, little job, or sorry, big hire, little hire. What, how did you then connect the dots from that to the actual content creation? Was it, okay, we're going to do two posts a day, and one of them is going to be sort of, you know, it's going to fall in line with this, and the next one's going to fall in line with sort of the little higher. You know, did you guys have a framework? Was it that structured? Or kind of talk me through the process from how you guys, you know, evolved.
Yeah. We had a framework, and it was more like on a percentage basis. We wanted to have, you know, 30% be focused on one thing, and 40% on another, and 20% on this, and then the other 20% on that. So we kind of had it set out and that evolved over time, but we had it set out there. So we had this plan, and we were reviewing our content calendar frequently, and always like passing it through this filter and this funnel of like, this is what we want our content to be structured as. So for example, like 20% of the time we wanted it to be like back scenes or team or something internal to help our customers get to know the people behind Gathre. Right.
Yep. Okay.
And another 30% of the time it was like, this is inspiring content that's like, you know, meant to help you tie in emotionally. And that was very jobs focused, right? That was like, this is a mom at the beach with her 2-year-old, and they are making sandcastles, you know, and this is how the mat benefits her and why you could also benefit from that. Or, you know, a mom at the park who's like out on a picnic, and you know, she just spilled something, and it's a picture of her like wiping up a mess right off the mat, you know? So we had different categories of content that we focused on, and we were very diligent about following that content strategy and that plan, because I think that's important, because without casting a broad enough net and being diligent about it, it's very easy to stray off that path, you know? And it's so beneficial today with social media, where we have we can have a constant pulse on how well something resonates. I don't always need to just go measure sales data to see how well something is going. I can go look at Instagram and see how many likes or how many comments, how much engagement going on.
Yep.
And it's like a constant survey, constant feedback from customers that I'm getting, even if they're not real customers, or maybe potential customers, or maybe they just like following the brand. It's showing me what's working and inversely what's not, right? And that's very helpful. And I think impossible to really get a true sense for that unless you kind of go out on a limb sometimes to try and do something you don't think is going to work very well, because you may be wrong sometimes, and that will lead you down a path that's fantastic, that that will lead to lots of new growth.
And then kind of taking it from there and to where it is today, where a lot of that content sounds like it's not being produced in-house, it's being produced by, influencers and sort of, ambassadors, quote unquote ambassadors. Talk me through, how does that process work now? Like on a weekly basis, how are you guys planning content now, leveraging, ambassadors and influencers?
Yeah. So we have a huge arsenal of, a huge folder that just continues to stack up of content that we can use. And so now we're really trying to just take that content and shape it to what we are, what we're trying to post, what's trying to hit that, content plan. We receive content back that fills so many different categories. Today, just as an example, we have, I think we started with 4 different product categories when we launched, and today we have 28 or 29. So with 29 different product categories, that gives us it's a pretty big need to try and fill on one Instagram account to touch on each of those in some meaningful way. And so, we have these folders of content that we get, or we're tagged in, or that has been sent in by an influencer, that we categorize and we put kind of in this holding place. And one thing that's really important to us, at least, is making sure that the squares that you can see when you visit our profile on Instagram, that there's a good balance of color, good balance of white space, good balance of product mix, and that hits more than just product, that maybe also brings in some inspiring content. So that's kind of how we operate today. We pool in this content, and sometimes we sit on it for 6 months before it actually gets used, or sometimes things never get used. But when it's more coordinated around some sort of product launch, oftentimes we'll use that in different marketing channels, some on Instagram, some maybe in a newsletter, some maybe on Pinterest, some maybe in our Facebook group. They all have kind of a different slant to who they reach and why people engage with us there. But it gives us so much content that we can use and kind of customize based on, again, that feed. What does it look like? And is this the right balance and mix?
That's really helpful. And how much content do you guys produce in-house now versus, what you used to do, before you started leveraging influencers? I'm just trying to get a sense for how much that's been cut down.
Yeah. I would say of the content we share on Instagram, at least, that maybe a quarter of it was generated by us or less.
Wow. Okay.
Whereas that used to be 90%, when we first started. And as far as frequency, we have a photo shoot of some sort, whether it's flat lays and small things, all the way up to maybe a full blown day shoot or day and a half shoot. That's still happening once a month here.
Okay.
But it used to be every week,
Yeah. That's okay. That's incredibly helpful. I think, like I said, you guys do an incredible job when it comes to visual storytelling. So I really wanted to break that down so that other people can understand what goes into this. How did it evolve? And how do you get to the point where you're at now? What are you leveraging now? Going forward, right? So 2020 into 2021, what do you see as your biggest growth channels or biggest levers moving forward?
Yeah. And maybe maybe I stated this a bit before, but I think product diversity. We have a very aggressive product launch schedule for 2020 with new items that are, not even really in our current category that are set for the year. And that is going to be, that's one of our big bets. Every year we send out a list of big bets to the team and say, here's where we're really focusing and going to double down on. And product development is one of those for us this year. Just because I think it represents an opportunity for us where, one of the main tenets of what we do as a brand is we want to create something that has the right balance of function and aesthetic at a good price point. So like almost a Venn diagram of those three things that creates the sweet spot for Gathre. And so we see that as being a huge opportunity for growth, something that, that I, as a visionary person, maybe I think that it can grow us 3x or 4x of what we currently are today, just on the back of new product alone.
And it sounds like that's what's gotten you to where you are now. So it makes sense to double down, right? And as somebody who has seen and felt the product, it's a pretty, you guys put a lot of emphasis on product quality. Whereas I think you can very quickly churn out a lot of cheap product. That's something you guys do not do, right? So it makes complete sense. And how much of sort of the growth now or sales now is coming from, actual paid channels versus just your organic channels?
That's a hard one to answer because attribution is always
it's so hard.
Blurry,
it's
right?
so tough. And part of the reason why I asked, I was just kind of curious to hear how you answered it, because everybody always has that same hesitation where attribution is tough, right? But if you had to ballpark it, or at least how do you guys talk about it internally? Or do you have a metric internally where you're like, okay, we only want to see this percentage of our sales coming from paid? Right. So I know there's a lot of brands out there that sort of view sort of organic growth as a much healthier form of growth and really want to restrict paid because they think, it's really very, very difficult to sort of predict the cost of paid in the future. And so if you're too highly leveraged, that's sort of seen as a sort of a potential weakness or flaw in the business. But the point being is like, do you guys talk about that internally and say, hey, we want to sort of limit paid, or we have a certain percentage of sales that we want to see come from paid?
Yeah, I would. So just to answer the question, I didn't mean to totally dodge that, but on the, Instagram and like Facebook and Google paid ad attribution channels, that's telling me that it's bringing in a third of our revenue, roughly, maybe a little bit more sometimes. Based on customer feedback, we have a post-purchase survey set up that's just, asks everyone who purchases from us a short survey. And we set that up to figure out what customers were telling us where we should attribute sales to. And 60%, I would say, is Instagram. And that's a blurry comment too, because what is Instagram? Well, Instagram for us could mean an Instagram influencer. It could mean an Instagram ad. It could mean an Instagram like giveaway, right? It could mean our own organic content. There's so many different categories inside Instagram that 60% is great, but it's also like, okay, well, I want to drill down deeper. And even if I ask the customer to help me drill down deeper to understand, they may not always know. They're not going to necessarily perceive that there was some co-branded thing or some sponsored giveaway with an influencer, or if it was, they don't always perceive that. They just find it there, and that's kind of like, oh yeah, I found you guys there. And even if they heard about it from a neighbor and the neighbor was like, oh yeah, I love it, and they go to Instagram, that's still what they may attach to the reason for their purchase. So anyway, I just wanted to walk through that. And that was, Nate at Chatbooks, the CEO there, they've spent a lot of money on developing this really robust attribution model. And then after a while, he just scrapped the whole thing and went to what customers are saying attribution came from. So at his suggestion, I put that in place, and it really did a lot to educate us on where attribution was coming from. But social media and like, I guess the paid side of advertising is very important to us. We put a lot of effort into it, and a lot of times it's boosting the content we're already creating as opposed to doing something new that's just a, paid ad set. But yeah, I hope that answers the question.
No, it is. That's very helpful. And we'll start moving towards wrapping up here because we're going to be edging up on an hour here pretty quick. But the content's been so good, I have not wanted to cut you off. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was team, because I know you guys have gone through a fairly ambitious sort of hiring spree of the last, call it 1 to 2 years for a number of reasons. But I'd like to understand, and we don't have to go through like every single position because it sounds like there's about 12 positions. But what I would like to understand is sort of your framework of thinking through who to hire and why. And I see this question asked a ton amongst brands that we work with, especially brands that are in that sort of 7-figure range, sort of mid 7-figure range, which is look, we've sort of graduated beyond the founders and the founding team or the husband-wife team and maybe some VAs or freelancers to now having a real full-blown team and starting to make full-blown hires. Who was what were sort of the first few hires you made and why?
The first hire we made was in customer service. As you could expect, maybe that's for an e-commerce company. It's not something that always feels like the best use of time for an owner or founder to be doing in those early stages, at least when the volume gets to a certain point. So, and we were shipping our own goods when we first started. So it was shipping and fulfillment, and then customer service that we first handed off. And that still represents probably like 25% of our team today is customer service. And that includes for us, like commenting on social media and making sure we have an active presence with customers who are tagging us and commenting on our posts and so forth.
Gotcha.
But aside from that, we hired a graphic designer like in our second year. Like maybe we were a year and a half old, which I know some of my colleagues, I have a lot of colleagues here in Utah in the same e-commerce space, the same customer, different product. But I think we're the only ones that have like an internal graphic designer, especially one that's full-time. And we've had 2. So graphic design and designing content is something that's so big for us. That's content creation and graphic design. It's like those 2 things are key. So the things that are important to us are reflected internally with our HR. And I think our marketing and our design and content team makes up like half or more of our team.
And what's the graphic designer specifically working on? Like what are you guys doing from a graphic design standpoint?
Yeah. So they're creating anywhere from like a tech pack, which is like, the instruction manual on how to create a specific product, all the way to working on like newsletter content, assets for newsletters where we're taking some photos and overlaying some text, or creating new banners for the website, or maybe creating some icons, to help explain something better, building content for paid ads, working on, maybe styling. The graphic designers here also have a great eye and have developed an eye for styling. So they'll help style some flat lays, and it's our graphic designers who have learned how to use the camera well, and they'll edit some photos sometimes. They'll take photos sometimes, and they'll do some styling, flat lay type styling.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a diverse graphic designer.
Yeah. So they kind of get to wear a lot of hats in a small company, and we train them and teach them on all of these things, but they really become a huge asset to the team. They're like a visual expert at Gathre, beyond just having the skill set of being a graphic designer, they kind of become this like visual expert.
Got it. So it sounds like the majority of the team is focused around customer service and then creative in some way, right?
Yeah.
So whether that's content or graphic design, and then how about just very quickly, what's the rest of the team makeup? What are the key positions?
Yeah, so we have someone in finance that help keep things straight and clear, so we always know how we can try and attribute success to something on the profit and loss statement. We have a supply chain an operations girl who is fantastic, and she handles pretty much all of our suppliers and orders from PO to arrival at our warehouse. And then we have a marketing data analyst who I would argue and say she's kind of part of the creative and marketing team because she informs so many of the decisions we make on content we're building. But aside from that, we have a copywriter on the design marketing team, and it's pretty much just those three categories: customer service, maybe 25%, operations and supply chain, which is maybe 15%, and then the rest is all marketing and creative.
And who heads up marketing? Of the founders, who would be sort of the CMO or sort of chief brand officer?
I would say that's been Jessica on our team. From the start, she's taken that role kind of as over marketing. And she and Marilee both recently in the last 6 months have taken, Marilee maybe about a year ago and Jessica maybe about 3 or 4 months ago, but took a big step back to be more active in their role as mothers at home with kids. But Jessica, up to a few months ago, was driving all of the marketing strategies and ideas, and that's now kind of transitioned off to our marketing data analyst on the team, who's kind of taken a bigger role with marketing strategy and content planning. And as owners and we're still very active in that part because we see it as such a huge opportunity. But it's no longer kind of all just centralized in one person.
Okay, cool. Just curious, given that's such a critical piece of the business, didn't know as you guys have hired roles in, if that was a role you're going to hire for, if that's really still sort of sits at the founder level. Yeah,
at least the strategy side of it, definitely.
Cool. Okay. Well, Devin, this was awesome. This was really, really informative. I think folks listening, especially around how you guys have approached this primarily from a content and product standpoint, right? You can't get more sort of distilled down and sort of focused than that. We hear all day long people, chirping and yelling about, things like, paid acquisition and paid ads and, affiliate marketing and all the various different tactics that all have their place, right? But at the end of the day, if you can't distill down your growth down to product, right? And then how you speak about your product and show people your product, which would be content. I think that tends to get lost a bit. So I think this was a really helpful episode for other folks out there to kind of help ground everybody and kind of get everybody back focused on what they really need to be focusing on at the end of the day.
Oh, thanks. I hope it's helpful. When you reached out and wanted to connect and learn more about us, it's what do we have to share? We don't really. I didn't feel
everybody thinks that.
There, but
everybody thinks that. No, but you guys have done an incredible job on the content side. So this was really good.
Awesome. Thanks, Alan.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, we'll stop it there and probably bring Devin and the team back here later to sort of check in on things are going. But we'll wrap it up there. So thanks for coming on the show, Devin.
Thank you so much.
Hey crew, it's Alan Bird again. And real quick before you go, would you like a weekly digest of what's working today in the world of consumer-facing e-commerce? Every week, our team of strategists compile a single email with growth strategies and operations tactics that help you stay ahead of the curve and ahead of the competition. Think of it as the brand operator's cheat sheet. Just head over to thecommercelab.com to sign up.